The flagship of the Galactic Fleet was more than a warship. It was a symbol, a moving fortress, a crown jewel of engineering, the vessel that held together an empire of 1,000 species. And now, it was breaking apart. Circuits fried, conduits screamed, the heart of the ship faltered. Every alien engineer, every automated system, every carefully crafted protocol failed. Their finest minds watched helplessly as their greatest creation began to die. But then, a single message rippled through the void. There is one species, one chance. Humans. The same unpredictable race dismissed as crude, chaotic, too reckless to be trusted with precision. And yet, when perfection shattered, when the flawless failed, it was the hands of humans that could reach where no one else dared. So they called us. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. The question is, what happens when the galaxy's survival rests in the grip of the very species it once underestimated? His name was Lieutenant Commander Aaron Holt. Back on Earth, before the stars ever called him, he had been a mechanic in a forgotten coastal town. A man who fixed broken fishing boats with hands worn by salt and oil. Not a hero, not a soldier, not some chosen figure of destiny, just a human who understood that when something broke, you didn't surrender to it. You fixed it. That stubbornness had carried him into the void. The Navy taught him discipline, the fleet taught him patience, but Earth had taught him grit. He was known among his peers not for brilliance, but for the way he refused to let go of a problem, no matter how impossible it seemed. And now that stubborn mechanic, who once patched engines with duct tape and prayer, was standing inside the failing heart of the most advanced starship in the galaxy. The flagship was colossal, a living cathedral of steel and plasma, with corridors wide enough for shuttles, reactor cores that glowed like captured suns, and a command bridge that seemed to stare into infinity itself. To the galaxy's citizens, it was invincible. To Aaron's eyes, it was a machine. And machines broke. He had been brought aboard as part of a token engineering exchange. Humans weren't supposed to be crucial here. They were supposed to observe, to learn from the superior alien engineers who operated systems far beyond human comprehension. But Aaron noticed things. He noticed the hesitation in the alien crew, the way their hands hovered but never touched the failing systems. He noticed their equations, perfect on paper, collapsing in reality. He noticed the silence in their voices, the kind of silence that comes when brilliance finds its limits. And then the alarms began. The flagship's primary reactor, a star-in-a-bottle core, was destabilizing. If it ruptured, the explosion would shatter not just the ship, but the entire fleet clustered around it. Thousands of lives would vanish in the blink of an eye. Worse, the Empire's enemies waited in the dark. One failure, and they would descend. Aaron felt the weight pressing down on him. He wasn't the highest-ranking officer. He wasn't supposed to lead. But when every alien eye turned away from the sparking conduits, when every carefully crafted tool fell short, his were the only hands still moving. And so, the ordinary mechanic became the only chance the galaxy's greatest warship had left. Yet doubt gnawed at him. He remembered the whispers in the mess halls. Humans were reckless, clumsy, improvisers with no respect for order. They were the ones who broke things more often than they fixed them. Was he about to prove those whispers right, or force them to swallow every word? Somewhere deep in the failing core, Aaron heard it. A sound he'd known since childhood. A shudder. A cough. The death rattle of a machine begging not to be abandoned. It was the sound of an engine on its last breath, the sound of something that could be saved if only someone had the courage to try. He tightened his grip on the tools slung across his belt, primitive things compared to the alien arsenal of instruments. But they were his. He knew how they felt in his hands. he trusted them. As sparks rained from above, he made his decision. He would not stand idle while the galaxy's flagship died. He would crawl through its guts, burn his hands raw, and do what no alien dared: get close enough to touch the beating heart of the ship itself. Because humans did not believe in perfect systems. They believed in fixing what was broken. And sometimes, that was what the universe needed most. Aaron Holt, the mechanic from a forgotten shore, was about to remind the galaxy why you never underestimated humanity. And the flagship? It was either about to be saved, or it would take him with it when it fell. The ship trembled as if a giant hand pressed against its hull. Bulkheads groaned, lights flickered, and somewhere deep in its wounded core, a reactor's pulse began to stutter like a failing heartbeat. Aaron Holt stood inside a cavernous chamber that dwarfed the largest stadium back on Earth. Around him, alien engineers, slender, jewel-eyed beings with translucent skin, moved in nervous patterns, their motions fluid but hesitant. They whispered calculations, exchanged data streams through flickering implants, and gestured with hands that never quite touched the sparking conduits. Because they were afraid. The reactor core was unstable, its containment fields fracturing. One wrong adjustment, one miscalculation, and the energy bottled within would tear through the ship like a newborn star. The aliens knew the numbers. The math was flawless, and still they were frozen. Aaron's hands shook, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the knowledge that if he waited for someone else to act, thousands would die. He slammed his tool case down, drawing startled looks from the engineers. "If I don't get inside that crawl space, your ship is finished." He slammed his tools case down, drawing startled looks from the engineers. "If I don't get inside that crawl space, your ship is finished." One of the aliens, a high-ranking chief with crystalline tendrils along his jaw, turned sharply. "Human, you cannot. The pathways are irradiated, the conduits live. Even our drones fail inside." "Then let me fail," Aaron snapped. "Because standing here doing nothing guarantees we all go down with this ship." The chamber fell silent. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the groan of stressed metal. Then the alien chief looked away. Whether in shame, fear, or reluctant trust, Aaron couldn't tell. But no one stopped him as he pulled on the heavy repair harness and clipped a primitive flashlight to his collar. He ducked into the crawl space. The corridor shrank to a throat of steel and sparking wires. The air was hot, acrid with ozone. He could feel radiation crawling across his skin despite the shielding, like invisible fire ants gnawing at him. He forced himself forward, dragging the tool case behind him. Memories flickered in the dark. He thought of the fishing boats back home, how he'd squeezed into rusted engine compartments barely wide enough to breathe, fixing pumps while waves slammed against the hull. This wasn't so different. Except if he failed here, it wouldn't be one boat sinking. It would be a fleet annihilated, an empire humbled, and humanity proven a mistake. He reached the first junction. Conduits sparking like lightning veins pulsed inches from his face. Alien engineers had designed these systems to be untouchable, perfectly sealed. Aaron saw something else. Panels that could be pried open, wires that could be rerouted, circuits that could be jury-rigged with nothing but stubborn willpower. "All right, girl," he muttered to the reactor as though it were a living thing. "I hear you. Let's patch you up." He pulled out his tools, metal pliers, an arc torch, rolls of insulated tape. Primitive things compared to the alien nanofabricators, but his hands knew them the way a soldier knew his rifle. With sweat stinging his eyes, he began stripping conduits and forcing bypasses, patching the flagship's veins one line at a time. Behind him, his comm crackled. The alien chief's voice trembled. "Human, your methods are irregular. The systems will not accept such crude splicing." "Watch me," Aaron growled, teeth clenched as sparks licked across his gloves. "You built this ship to be perfect. That's the problem. Nothing in the universe stays perfect. It breaks. And when it breaks, you don't calculate, you improvise. He twisted two mismatched wires together, taped them, and slammed the panel closed. The reactor's pulse steadied for 3 beats before shuddering again, harder. Aaron swore under his breath. Temporary fix. He had to go deeper. He crawled forward, deeper into the flagship's arteries. Outside the hull, war brewed. Enemy ships circled like wolves, waiting for the flagship's shield to collapse. Already, flashes of plasma fire streaked across the void as smaller escorts fought to hold the line. The entire galaxy seemed to balance on the heartbeat of this dying ship, and on one human mechanic's hands. Aaron worked furiously, sweat soaking through his undersuit, muscles trembling. Each time he rerouted power, the flagship groaned like a wounded beast. Each time he crawled deeper, the radiation alarms on his wrist screamed louder. He ignored them. But the deeper he went, the more alien the systems became. Tubes of liquid plasma hissed beneath crystal shielding. Magnetic coils thrummed with forces that made his teeth ache. He had no schematics, no manual. Only instinct, stubbornness, and the language of broken machines. Then he saw it, the heart of the wound. A cracked containment coil, glowing white-hot, spilling arcs of unstable energy that danced like lightning serpents. If it ruptured fully, the reactor would detonate. No shield, no evacuation would save them. Aaron's throat went dry. How do you fix something built to never fail? The alien chief's voice whispered in his comm. Do not touch it. That is the core of the core. To interfere is death. Aaron smiled grimly. Then I guess it's a good thing I'm human. He unclipped the torch, steadied his breath, and slid forward. Sparks lashed across his visor. The coil screamed like a wounded animal. Every instinct told him to back away. Instead, he reached in, hands steady, despite the pain crawling across his arms. He cut into the housing, ripped away melted plating, and exposed the coil. It was beautiful, terrifying, but beautiful. Like holding a star between trembling fingers. His tools weren't enough. He knew it the moment he saw the damage. No patch, no splice could restore it. Not in time. Unless he pulled a knife from his belt. Not a tool, just a knife, worn and familiar. He sliced open the insulation of his own harness, yanked out the thick cabling that powered his life support. Without it, the radiation would eat him alive faster. But it was the only material flexible enough to wrap the breach. His comm erupted with alien protests. Human! You severed your protection! You cannot survive this! Aaron gritted his teeth, wrapping the glowing coil with the cable, forcing it tight against the breach. The heat seared through his gloves, blistering his skin. He screamed but didn't let go. Machines don't care about perfect, he hissed through clenched teeth. They care about working. The reactor roared. The arcs flickered, then stabilized, dimming to steady pulses. For the first time since the alarms began, the flagship shuddered not in death throes, but in rebirth. Aaron sagged against the wall, chest heaving. His visor was cracked, his arms burned raw. He didn't know how much longer he could crawl, let alone breathe. But the reactor was holding. For now. He activated his comm. Tell your captain. She's got her heartbeat back, but don't get too comfortable. This is a patch, not a cure. We've still got work to do. Before the alien chief could answer, a thunderous explosion rocked the hull. The crawl space buckled, dust and sparks raining down. Aaron barely held on as the ship tilted violently. The enemy had struck. They weren't waiting anymore. Through the comm, he heard panicked voices. Enemy boarding craft piercing the outer decks, gunfire echoing in the flagship's corridors. The war wasn't at the doorstep anymore. It was inside. And Aaron Holt, burned and half broken, was trapped in the guts of a ship now under siege. He gripped his torch tighter, breath ragged. The reactor wasn't out of danger yet. And neither was he. Because sometimes, the galaxy doesn't give you the luxury of one battle at a time. Sometimes you had to fix the ship, while the war came straight for you. The ship shook again, harder this time. Aaron nearly lost his grip as the crawlspace twisted like a ribcage under a giant's fist. Alarms screamed through his comm. "Boarders on deck 7! Hull breach on port side! Shields collapsing!" And over it all, the reactor's pulse hammered like a drum about to burst. The patch was holding, but only barely. If the enemy strike teams reached this chamber, or if the field slipped for even a second, everything, the flagship, the fleet, Aaron himself, would be reduced to ash. He pulled himself forward, dragging his battered body toward the auxiliary panel. His hands shook. The burns on his arms screamed with every motion, but he kept moving, because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about thousands of lives clinging to hope in the darkness. The crawl space hatch behind him exploded. Fragments of steel tore past his head as a squad of enemy raiders burst inside, scaled predators in segmented armor, their eyes glowing with hunger. They had cut through bulkhead after bulkhead to get here, and they smelled blood. Aaron froze. He had no rifle, no armor, just a torch, a knife, and the half-dead reactor humming behind him. The lead raider hissed, leveling a plasma carbine. "Step away, human. One shot, and your heart explodes with your machine." Aaron's mind raced. He wasn't a soldier, but he was human, and humans fought dirty. He flicked the torch on, blinding white light searing the crawl space. The raider snarled, eyes sizzling, firing wild. Plasma bolts ripped through conduits, sparks cascading. Aaron lunged forward, closing the distance in a heartbeat, slamming the arc torch across the raider's faceplate. The alien screamed, collapsing as molten glass and flesh fused together. The others roared in rage. Aaron didn't wait. He tore the plasma carbine from the alien's claws, the weapon nearly too heavy for him, and fired down the crawl space. The recoil bruised his shoulder, but the shot caught one raider square in the chest, hurling him back. The confined tunnel filled with smoke, screams, and burning ozone. But there were more. Too many. Behind him, the reactor wailed, a rising crescendo like a heart straining to beat. If the firefight continued, stray fire would rupture the patch. And then, none of this mattered. Aaron pressed his back against the coil, shielding it with his own body. The carbine shook in his hands. He fired until the charge ran dry, the weapon coughing sparks. 3 raiders down, but 2 still advancing, teeth bared, blades drawn. His chest heaved, his vision blurred. He thought of home, the salt air, the smell of oil on his hands, his sister's laughter echoing across the shore. And then he made his choice. He ripped the cable from his harness, the same line he'd used to patch the reactor, and yanked it free. The patch began to unravel, energy hissing like a beast awakening. The raiders froze, sensing the danger. Aaron's voice was raw, defiant. "You want this ship? You'll have to take it with me." And he jammed the live cable into the crawlspace wall. Energy roared through the chamber, a storm of lightning surging outward. The raiders screamed as arcs of plasma ripped across their armor, cooking them alive. The crawlspace shook violently, but Aaron held on, forcing the cable down, his own body convulsing as electricity seared through him. Then, silence. The last raider fell smoking to the floor, armor fused to his skin. Aaron collapsed, gasping. His hands were blistered, shaking uncontrollably. His body felt like fire had replaced his blood. But the reactor, it was still beating, weak but steady, alive. His comm crackled, faint beneath the ringing in his ears. The alien chief's voice. "Human, Aaron Holt, what have you done?" Aaron forced himself upright, leaning against the coil. "I fixed it, bought us time, But she won't last unless we reroute the load. You'll have to finish it. All of you." For a moment, there was only silence. Then another voice broke through. Different, stern, commanding. The flagship's captain. "Human Holt, you've done the impossible. You bought us a chance." Aaron laughed weakly, his throat raw. "That's what we do, Captain. We make chances when no one else can." Outside the hull, the battle raged, but the flagship's shields flared back to life, rippling like reborn wings. Enemy ships reeled in shock as the wounded giant refused to die. Allied vessels surged forward, inspired, rallying to protect their flagship's second breath. Inside the crawl space, Aaron's vision dimmed. He knew he'd given everything, maybe too much. His burns were deep, his veins full of radiation. He might not see another sunrise. But as the ship steadied, as the reactor's heartbeat returned, he allowed himself one final smile. Because in the end, the galaxy's greatest warship hadn't been saved by flawless equations or untouchable technology. It had been saved by a human mechanic who refused to let it die. And whether he lived or not, the message would echo across the stars. When the galaxy breaks, it's humans who know how to put it back together. The flagship drifted in silence for what felt like eternity. Then, slowly, its vast systems began to hum again, lights flickering across its endless corridors, shields pulsing like a reborn heartbeat. The crew of 1,000 species stood, stunned. Where they had seen only failure, collapse, and inevitable death, now there was life. Where their greatest minds had frozen, unable to act, a single human had crawled into the fire and dragged their ship back from the brink. Aaron Holt lay unconscious in the medbay, his body wrapped in gauze and regeneration fields, his skin blistered, his lungs scorched, his veins marked with radiation burns. He should not have survived. And yet, there he was, chest rising and falling, fragile but alive. Around him, alien doctors whispered. They could not comprehend the choice he had made. To sever his own lifeline, to stand unshielded against a star's fury, to risk death not for his people alone but for theirs. Such defiance of survival logic was madness to them. And yet, it had worked. The flagship's captain, a towering Avori with skin like obsidian glass, stood at Aaron's bedside. She had commanded battles across 3 galaxies. She had watched worlds fall. But never had she seen courage burn so fiercely in so small a frame. "Human Holt," she murmured, though he could not hear. "You have shown us a strength beyond numbers, a wisdom born not of perfection, but of imperfection embraced. For that, the galaxy owes you more than it can ever repay." Outside, the war had shifted. Enemy fleets scattered when they saw the flagship rise from its grave. The Alliance, moments from despair, surged with renewed fury. Inspired by one man's defiance, they drove their enemies back into the void. And when the story spread, because stories always do, it carried not the names of admirals or alien tacticians. It carried the name of a human mechanic from Earth. Aaron Holt. Across distant colonies, children whispered his name with awe. Soldiers repeated his story before battle, steadying their resolve. Engineers, human and alien alike, looked at their machines differently, no longer as flawless monuments, but as living things that could be coaxed, patched, and carried through failure. And in the high councils of the Galactic Alliance, where humans had once been regarded as crude improvisers unworthy of trust, there was silence when Aaron's deeds were recounted. Silence, and then a slow, undeniable respect. They had dismissed humanity as reckless. They had laughed at our crude tools. They had doubted our worth. But when the flagship of 1,000 worlds faltered, it was a human's hands, burned, trembling, ordinary, that kept it alive. Aaron awoke 3 days later. His throat was raw, his body felt like lead, but his eyes opened to see alien faces watching him, not with scorn, not with doubt, but with something he had never expected. Reverence. The captain leaned close, her obsidian features softened by awe. Lieutenant Commander Holt, your name will be etched into the core of this vessel. From this day, she will carry not just the flag of an empire, but the mark of humanity. Aaron blinked, his lips cracking into a faint smile. I just fixed what was broken. Yes, the captain said quietly. And in doing so, you reminded us that sometimes the galaxy does not need perfection. It needs humanity. The words spread, recorded, carried across the stars. And soon, every world in the Alliance knew them. Years later, when the flagship sailed again into battle, its hull still bore a patch of scorched plating near the reactor core. Engineers could have polished it away, made it seamless. But they didn't. They left it there. A scar. A reminder. Because perfection had failed. Humanity had not. And so the galaxy remembered. Not the flawless equations, not the untouchable systems, but the stubborn human mechanic who had refused to let a ship die. Because that is what it means to be human. To face the impossible, to crawl into the fire and to say, I will not let go. And long after the war ended, long after Aaron Holt's name passed into legend, one truth remained, whispered like a prayer among the stars. When the galaxy breaks, only humans know how to put it back together.